Hey, welcome to Hearsay. I'm Paul,
And I am Patrick.
and today we're going to be talking about prequels, specifically the pitfalls and darkness of creating prequels and what they can do to franchises, because they can really screw up things, can't they, Patrick?
Yeah, they can. And everybody strap in because this is going to be one of those ones where Paul brought this idea up and then we ended up having a 40-minute conversation just about it and forgetting that we should probably save all that stuff for live on air, like right now. So me and Paul have already exercised a bunch of demons. But just before we went live, we almost started exercising demons again about some of the issues and the pitfalls of prequels. So yeah, I think we've got plenty to say, Paul. Plenty to say.
Yeah, and we have done prequel stuff before, but this is more kind of a franchise. The reason this kind of came up is the what goes. Are we lost?
No, we're still here.
Okay,
We can
great.
keep
Sorry.
going.
Yeah. So the reason we was the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Song and Snakes, which is essentially the new Hunger Games prequel, and which is essentially the rise of Cornelius Snow. This is essentially, which was Cornelius Snow, the president that we all know and love in the Hunger Games, rise to power essentially during the early stages of the Hunger Games, kind of thing. This is an example of the reason why this can go really wrong. This movie's already received mixed kind of reviews. It's based on a book that which just came out, I think, like 3 years ago. But yeah, it's essentially just giving you the background story of Cornelius Snow. My problem with
Yeah.
the problem with this prequel is the fact is that it humanizes Snow a little bit, and like
Okay.
it removes essentially that it shows you how he got to where he is, where all we know him in the Hunger Games is he is a tyrant, and then in this it's kind of like, oh, he's a struggling person who's like trying to make everything work, and
Yeah.
he's trying to get a job so that he can support his sister and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, these are all good qualities of a human being struggling to like make things ends meet, and how you get there and stuff. And it's just hard to see the eventuality um into President Snow, that evil, like completely non-human kind of tyrant. And this is the kind of thing that
And
we're talking about. This
yeah, so
is yeah.
sorry, Paul. Was he not Donald Sutherland
Yeah.
in the I should admit straight away that I am not the best person to talk about Hunger Games because I amn't that into it all, as in love the first movie. No, I saw the second one. I can't remember if I ever got around to the third. But even I know what you're talking about there, Paul, because I'm on the record defending sequels a lot on this channel. I rarely defend prequels, and it's for the reason that you've just started hinting towards, which is he was a tyrant in that first, when you're first introduced to him in this universe. If you're going to go and make him into a sympathetic character and know that he turns into the tyrant, you already know what happens next. Uh, is there a good reason to make that movie other than you want to make more Hunger Games movies, or in the case of the book, write more Hunger Games books?
Yeah, like that's the thing, because it's like the only good part of the story that they're trying to write here is the fact that they're trying to show a little bit of the reason why he essentially, I guess, very quickly hates Katniss, in the sense that there's
Okay.
a character in this storyline, I guess, in the Songbirds and Snakes storyline, that reminds him that Katniss reminds him of later on in life. And it's kind of just like, okay, cool. So essentially now what you've done is you haven't made it into she's a new kind of threat to him. You're making it kind of weirdly personal before we even know about him in the original Hunger Games film. So it's a
Yeah.
bit of a weird one. But like, it also destroys the legend of that person. Like, I actually should have brought the John Wick stuff. There's no prequel for John Wick except for the Continental, but that's kind of fine. It's telling the story of essentially how the Continental got from a shady hotel to a shady hotel with morals, I guess, or rules.
With a
Yeah.
code. Yeah.
Kind of thing. But it's like we get to enjoy if they ever did a prequel where they show John Wick's impossible task, um that would kind of ruin the legend of the character. We never
Yeah.
get to see the impossible task, meaning that in our heads we have no idea what that task was. You know, it builds the legend. So when we see him fight and stuff like that, we're just like, he is already a legend. When people see him, they're like, there's John Wick. We're kind of screwed,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And we get to enjoy the whole like we get to enjoy that whole thing of going like, you know, there we get to take part in the legendary story of John Wick. If we already know the impossible task, if we've seen the impossible task, it's no longer impossible. Like,
Yeah. It's Mystique. Mystique is being removed when you do those sorts of things. The air of mystery. But my God, like, and this is why I have a big definition or a big split between sequel and prequel. If you're doing a sequel, you're taking your universe that's created, and if you take some of the characters, you're saying, and here's what's happened next. In a prequel, and this is pitfall number one out of many that we're talking about. If you go and start trying to establish how a character became what they became, you can fill in gaps that nobody ever needed to fill in, but you can also fill in gaps that people definitely did not need you to fill in because it ruins something about that character. You can have a character in sequels become less likable, become worse, go off and have terrible stories, make bad films, but you're not going before the first time you met that character and going, by the way, we're going to ruin their whole build up, but still try and enjoy the first experience you ever had of them. uh, it's it's so much more damaging to go into a character's past and do a poor job than it is to go into a character's future and do a poor job, because their past sets them up for who they are the day you met them. They can change after that point, and that can just be bad films, bad entries in a franchise, whatever it might be. But if you go and ruin their backstory and the build up to who they are the day you met them, it's very hard to shake that off.
yeah, no, it is. One of the perfect examples is going. We're going to go into the Star Wars universe quite
Oh,
quickly
please,
because,
please.
yeah, we'll go first to Han Solo because it is seen as one of the worst kind of
Yes.
prequels within the thing. Within the universe. We will go further into the Star Wars thing, so don't worry, everybody who's just like, what about the trilogy
Star Wars is
prequel?
getting us kicking tonight.
Yeah,
Don't
kind of
worry,
thing.
everybody.
But it's
Join
not.
in.
It's. I wouldn't say that Star Wars is getting its kicking. It's more the fact is the choices in which creative people made to. It's not creatives. It's money people. We need to establish that immediately. Prequels are money things. They're not there to establish much. Um, but Han Solo is probably the worst contender in the story because we never asked. No one. We asked the question. "Oh, I wonder how Han Solo met Chewie, or I wonder exactly how Lando lost the Millennium Falcon to Han Solo. Like these are all questions in which we enjoy to ask and get to imagine ourselves. No one asked the question of why aren't they making that? Like why aren't they showing us that? And the reason
And,
is because it ruins a legendary character.
and the reason they're making it really is money, and we all know that. And that's the worst thing. If you make like Rogue One and Solo a Star Wars movie, we'll get on to Rogue One in a minute. I know, Paul, but I said the same thing about both of those in conception. And that is, this isn't necessary. Now, the difference in execution, and again, that pitfall, if you don't take an existing character, if you go back in time in a universe and look at other characters that are very side or were mentioned, but you didn't know anything about them, that's there you're in the yes, that's a good idea, safer area of prequel. If you take one of your main, the coolest space cowboy there's ever been, and his giant walking carpet friend, oh my God, when I was watching Solo and Han met Chewie and it was disappointing, I was crushed. Because to say that those two, when I was a child, the idea of their backstory, it's the most amazing thing in the world. But I could write it. I could write it in my head. I could have them not just go on any adventure that I wanted, but I could have their meeting be any mystery I needed it to be. To show it, and show it in a subpar way, and really kind of almost do it in everything that was. Oh, guys, I could talk all night about Solo. Paul, you'll stop me, but I'm just going
Yeah,
to say this one sentence. Every single thing that they show you in Solo is like somebody looking at the camera going, eh, eh? And that's when he
would
got the gun. Eh, eh? That's when he got the jacket. That's the dice. Chewie. Everything. We're just checking off our list of all the things that we've ever associated with Han Solo. Let's make sure. Check, 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 check. You happy? We've covered it all as quick as we could in really meaningless ways. I'm not going to curse. Yes, I am. Cover your children's ears. Fuck them for making Solo. It's a joke.
yeah. Okay, so let's go through some of the list of stuff because some of the negative pitfalls that we've got here. So first of all, Solo has a high fan expectation from it straight off the bat. You
Yeah.
know, it's going to be expected of how these like, and with that high expectation, it's then going to be it's going to be compared to the originals, to the original characters specifically. You know, which is, and then it's going to be over reliant on nostalgia to be able to, like, you know, as you say, the winks and nods kind of thing. You know, and then one of the biggest pitfalls we have is filling them in the gaps. It's that need to fill in the gap for no reason other than, well, that's a hole in the market of the movies that we could definitely fill for no reason. But that's the problem. So I have essentially a list here. We will, like, you know, me and Patrick have kind of lists of these kind of things, of these pitfalls and stuff, and every now and again we're going to list them, kind of things that these movies kind of fall into. The good thing is that although Han Solo falls into plenty of these things, which is when we're talking about the Rogue One prequel, this is kind of an
Which
example of kind of like,
I still have issues with, Paul, just so that we're on the. I am one of
yeah,
the few people that still, every time someone mentions Rogue One, the first thing I say is it wasn't necessary, because I still believe it wasn't necessary. I think they just did such a good job, they get a free pass.
yeah,
The difference between them and Solo is how good a job they did, but also how far away from the pit for the pitfalls they were by not having essentially main canon characters from the original trilogy.
yeah. Like, this is the thing. Rogue One essentially just avoided all of the pitfalls by essentially going, okay, we have a very a very loose story, which is how they got the Death Star plans. Spoiler alert for people.
Well, many Bothans did die
Yeah.
to bring us the information, Paul.
Yes. Yes. Who they were not in Rogue One. Um, but yeah, so Rogue One essentially takes a very loose storyline of how they got the Death Star plans and decides to make it into a story using characters that are not in a lot of the are not main characters within the Star Wars universe. We don't get Han Solo or Skywalker or anything like that. We may get the look of some Mon Calamari admiral guy that makes us think of Admiral Akbar, but isn't Admiral Akbar. And then
And
we
in
also,
fact, Paul, that was a trap.
it was, yes. We were just like, and then we realized that we were, you know, racist against Mon Calamaris. Um, but yeah, no. So this thing is, it decided to go left field of going. We want to tell the story of essentially how they got the Death Star plans. We decided that we would, not have any of the main characters involved in any kind of way, obviously because they're not involved in the rebellion at this point in time. Um, we'll introduce a whole bunch of new characters, and which is it's not, it doesn't have any character backstories that we need to fill in. It doesn't fit. It fills in a very general gap of how they got the Death Star plans. There's no comparison to the original ones other than tone, really. That's the thing. They don't really have any kind of. The good thing is that they kept within the time, the technology and time periods kind of things,
Yeah.
that they didn't add in some kind of ridiculous thing where they were just like, oh yeah, by the way, there's this other thing, and it's gonna really screw with the overall kind of, which we'll talk about later on in this Star Wars thing as well.
Yeah.
Um, the I will say the risk of pandering was a little bit there, because they were just going like, we need to make another Star Wars film and everybody will just love this kind of thing. But overall the pitfalls are not big, they're not massive, because I think that overall the story was a self-contained story that, like, didn't really kind of, if that was a terrible movie, we would all just be like, yeah, it's a shit movie. You know, pardon my language.
Yeah.
It's a terrible movie. We can just move on because, you know, A New Hope, that whole line in A New Hope where it's just like, yeah, many people died to get the plans. You'd be just like, oh yeah, I remember that terrible movie. Let's
Yeah.
move on, you know, kind of thing. So like,
Exactly.
it's a good way of doing it. They just went, yeah, let's just move over here, and that's it.
Well, I'm on the record preaching this over and over again. If you make something with love, care, and intention, and you're making it for the right reasons, then make all the sequels, prequels, spin-offs, etc. that you want. Because that's when people say, "Oh, I hate sequels." I say, "Well, you shouldn't, because a sequel can be a bad movie, but they're not all bad movies. Bad movies are things that are made without a good reason and love, care, and attention." In this case, the reason I was so annoyed at Rogue One, and still, even though I really like the movie, always go, it wasn't necessary, is because I know so many people got away with it that didn't deserve to. Rogue One was a well-made movie. It's awesome in so many ways, but there's a bunch of people that made money that would not have cared whether or not it was a good movie. They greenlit it just to make cash. The other thing, Paul, it's like we said it when we talked about Mandalorian first. In a galaxy far, far away, why did we keep ending up at a Skywalker house? Or why was we always, we were always next door to somebody that we'd seen before. Mandalorian, it was like, this is great.
Yeah.
They're doing something in the universe. That makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, then they were like, oh yeah, but also we're going to make sure Boba Fett appears. And like, well, maybe didn't actually need to do that, but whatever, different episode, different day. You did hint, Paul, though, at the idea of ruining things by introducing stuff, and Rogue One didn't do that.
No.
Would you mind if we segue to something else in Star Wars? Little Dusty Bin himself there, R2D2.
Yeah.
Has the most heinous use of something ever in a prequel, because there are two bad prequels and one okay prequel, and I'll let you all decide which one you think is which, because everybody's got different feelings. But there is a huge problem when you have R2D2 prior to Star Wars A New Hope, the first movie that everybody saw, then Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, episodes 4, 5, and 6, whatever way you want to refer to them. At no point did R2D2 fly. And somebody somewhere thought, you know what? This would be a great moment. We can do this. Let's have R2D2 sprout rocket boosters and fly and start, setting things on fire. When that happened, if I had had the strength, I would have actually thrown my cinema seat at the screen. I would have taken the whole row. If I was able to Hulk out, there would have been people flying at the screen.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this is a new caliber of bullshit that I will not stand for. And it even beats out Metachlorians, which we'll go on to in a moment, Paul, as one of the other dumb prequel things. But this is the worst. And anybody who thinks, no, it's cool, it looks cool, why not? Where did they go? Oh, he damaged them. What? Nobody ever fixed them? And no other droid ever flew around with rockets? Like, come on. Give me a break.
Yeah. Like this is yeah. It's a terrible kind of show of kind of like, yeah. So this turns R2D2 into Inspector Gadget essentially.
Yep.
Because it's just like, not only does he's able to hack keys, he's able to shock people because he shocks them in which is I think the third movie, in the sixth movie, kind of thing. He has boots. He has a periscope. Like, it just starts to add too much to him, kind of thing, that you're just like, all right, okay, we have to calm down. He's an astro droid. He's meant to go out on the top of a ship, stick to it, and repair whatever the things he's meant to repair, or get stuck in that little kind of like horrible constrained thing on an X-wing, like, and fix that kind of thing. So like, it's just
Seriously,
a bad
go gadget anything you need. If you turn them upside down, does it say made by the MacGyver Corporation?
yeah.
Like, what is the story that they decided? R2D2, the cute little rolling around in the sand guy, which also, raised some questions at the time about traction and sand, etc. But you could live with it. R2D2 was a legend of my childhood.
Yeah.
It was then given, basically, had all the franchise taken away from him, and it tarnished and this is the problem, there's a pitfall of a prequel. If you introduce something that completely destroys the original stories, which happen much later, you kind of can't take it back.
No, no. Like, if we're gonna go on to the midichlorians quite quickly, the midichlorians
Mm-hmm.
essentially filled in a gap that and ruined a mystery that was just there. Like, it was just like, we're gonna science this now because we need to, like, to explain the force. It was just kind of like, that's not necessary. It's not necessary to explain the force in some kind of biological kind of sense. You know, I don't need there just needs to be a membrane between me and the force that like is biological. It's just the force. It was magic. That's literally it. It's
The
just,
force was in all of us, Paul.
yeah.
In
Like,
all of us.
if
Whereas
you
now a blood test could tell me that you have it and I don't.
like, could you imagine if Gandalf was just like, yeah, the reason I can use magic is because I've got tiny like biological creatures inside. You'd be just like, what? No, magic. It doesn't matter that it's set in sci-fi. This is a space opera, like fantasy kind of like thing. That's what you want. It's I get to see people like blast, like, you know, people in space, and then I also get to see people move shit with their minds. Like, I don't need to know that there's like, and this isn't. Let me just tell you, this isn't new. This isn't new stuff. We're not breaking ground here.
No.
You know, we're just saying that this fills a
Exercising
gap
demons.
for no reason. You know?
Oh, it's full on. If you have midichlorians, I will find you, and then you will be a Jedi. It's like, Neeson, stop. You know, just knock it off. I again, R2D2 hadn't flown at this point, but I was just so happy there was a new Star Wars movie that it wasn't until after I left the cinema that I was like, hang on, midichlorian. Oh my God, what are they doing? And you know, Jar Jar Binks was like, all the things that I could be annoyed about the prequels, particularly Phantom Menace. Midichlorians took the Force away from us all for me, because previously the Force is strong in this one because the magic is strong in this one. Not the, well, you see, if we get two of these people together and they maybe breed, then maybe biologically eventually we'll get super Jedi. So, you know, yeah, don't even want to get into where that could end up, because that's just really dark.
We got to run to an ad, which is just there. So I'm going to run through ads. Sorry for jumping there, but we'll be back in a couple of seconds.
You obviously are like two people talking about movies, or you wouldn't even be seeing this ad. Well, don't tell anyone. But Hear Us Out isn't the only choice. You should check out our friends over at It Takes Two podcast. It's a podcast where two people take two films with the same plot or premise, watch it and discuss them. Films like Gremlins and Critters, or The Truman Show on EdTV. Lisa and Nick don't stop there though. They get creative and compare some unexpected movies. Some that you don't see the connection until you realise that they can be described in the same way. They launch new episodes every second Tuesday, or Monday if you're in New Zealand. Find them on your favourite podcast service, or check the link in our description down below. That's It Takes Two podcast. Tell them Hear Us Out sent you.
That was It Takes Two, friends of the show, yeah, go check them out. All on all their podcasting stuff. Yeah, so you were saying essentially, yeah, that the Force was essentially the magic of the Star Wars, and it got taken away from us.
And again, it's back to that pitfall of prequels that you can take away much easier than you can add, because you're adding further upstream. So whatever you pour in a prequel will run downstream into something that you've already seen, a story you've already been told. It's why sequels in general can be less damaging.
Yes,
because they can be ignored. Which, Paul, if you wouldn't mind a short segue, there's a sequel that I once ignored, and I don't know if Pop Culture is on with us tonight. Pop, if you're watching this in the future, no offense intended, we still need to have a face-off about Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. I just avoided it for years because it was a sequel that people had told me it's going to really annoy you about Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, do you know what one of the greatest prequels of all time is? Nobody bothers knowing this, except for nerds like us, obviously, film people. Technically, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the second movie, happens a year earlier than Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So the second movie in the Indiana Jones franchise is actually a prequel.
Yeah.
Do you know why that's never come to anybody's attention or done any damage? Because it just tells a story with Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That's how you do a prequel, everyone. That's the template.
Yeah, essentially what it does is it just explain it. It doesn't explain anything. It just gives us more of Indiana Jones. It gives us a little bit more of a storyline that we haven't had before. It may in the future may suggest some characters coming back, but not in the original trilogy in any kind of way. But yeah, it doesn't affect the story in any kind of way. It doesn't have like it also does help that the Indiana Jones films are separate entries kind of thing into
Yeah.
it. But being set a year before Raiders of the Lost Ark, it doesn't really affect us at all. It just it's just like, oh, that's pretty cool, you know, nothing
And
else.
The Last Crusade skirted the edges of prequeldom with the idea of young Indiana Jones and whips and snakes and how things came about. But again, you can do that in your own little story if you're trying to set up something that is relevant to the story, which later on is his relationship with his father. So you had to go back to him as a child, worked within the movie, was there for a purpose as an entry in Indiana Jones. Again, you can do sequels and you can make a terrible sequel, which apparently the latest Indiana Jones is not a great movie either. Don't know if I'll ever get around to watching it because I do regret actually going back and watching Crystal Skull. Um, but a prequel does damage that doesn't go away.
Yeah, it does. It's as you said, it's easier to take away than it is to add. One of the other parts of kind of I guess it's like the technology part. I guess.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
hit it, Paul.
okay, so we're gonna go into. So this is one of these things that I just don't understand. So first of all, we're going to talk about Prometheus, Alien, Prometheus kind of thing. Um, we'll go on to our biggest pitfalls as we go on. But one of the weird things that came out of Prometheus, people complained that the Prometheus was too futuristic. That's essentially compared like to the Nostromo, like it was like too futuristic. And I was just sitting there going like, which is one of our principles of technology and time period challenges, kind
Mm.
of thing. But the thing is that it's not. They're not introducing something brand new. They're not introducing like some kind of quantum drive, meaning that people didn't need to go to stasis,
Just
kind of thing.
touchscreens as opposed to CRTs.
Well, this is the thing. I did, like a lot of people came out and was just like, I don't understand why the Prometheus is just more futuristic than the Nostromo, and like people who understood and they were just like that kind of ruined the movie for me because it was just like
That's the thing that ruined Prometheus
yeah,
for you. You did not watch the rest of that movie.
people were just like yeah, it's essentially just that the technology differences between the two were just not great, and they were just like it looked more futuristic, and it's just like that is one of the pitfalls of technology and time period kind of challenges. But the thing is that people were coming out going like but it's like one of the most advanced exploration ships ever built, and the Nostromo is a truck.
Yeah, it's basically a hauler.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like you know, but that's the thing is that ruined by essentially going too futuristic with something and not taking into account of tone and kind of like the tone and like other kind of things. They ruined some of it for people. People were expecting an 80s 90s view of the future and they got a 2000s view of the future which is touchscreens and holograms and they
yeah.
were just like well this is screwed up now. We're getting into the engineers and the xenomorphs pretty quickly, but
Yeah,
you know this thing is just a weird one to get stuck on, but it is a perfect example of the problems with like
yeah.
introducing new technology or like the updating the tone and look of a movie within a franchise. Like it just happens.
Like I know why you chose Prometheus because it gives it gives you this, which is technology over time. And I agree with you completely. This one it can be explained away, and it's a weird thing to have taken people out of Prometheus because of everything else we've got to say about Prometheus, the steaming hunk of crap that it is. But there are other movies and other prequels that have done terrible jobs of kind of forgetting that, oh yeah, none of the technology that you are currently using exists in the later films. And it would be pedestrian technology. So it can happen. It very much can happen. But I'm kind of with you that this is not the most egregious example of it.
With
As in, Prometheus, I don't think is the most egregious
oh
example of
oh no
technology change. I'm
no
with you.
not at all. No, no, it's not. It's essentially Star Trek is probably one of the worst. Um,
Yeah, like I didn't want to hit them with it, but yeah, that's like
yeah,
there's an example. There are so many examples that are terrible,
yeah,
but using Prometheus as an example of this to kind of go, well, it can sometimes bother people when you could sort of explain it away and it shouldn't bother people. But I really think that we have this here because we have to talk about the biggest pitfall of doing something like Prometheus, because that's got to do with Alien, Paul.
yep,
One of the great nightmare creatures. It has acid for blood. Whoever
yeah,
came up with that, unbelievable genius. Scary, scary, unkillable. When you kill it, it's still going to melt you. It's got teeth inside its head. I Alien, the xenomorph, is one of the great horror, scary monster bad guys. And yet, Prometheus, Paul,
yep,
you got Space Jesus engineers throwing, I was going to say something really disgusting about doing things into a river, all manner of just silliness and stupidity, and going into the engineers. All you're really doing is undermining the scariness in the closet.
yeah.
You're not making the alien, the xenomorph, scarier. You just aren't. Don't go back and be like, here's where the monster came from.
Yeah,
Here's what the monster is. Because the monster was already scary.
yeah. Like we were talking about it. So, explaining the way that essentially the xenomorphs are some kind of weapon. There's some kind of like a way of essentially cleansing a planet when it fails because the engineers are just like, yeah, they didn't work out. Is just pathetic. And especially since the engineers came from essentially the space jockey kind of idea of like explaining away what was in the ship. But it's just like what would have been a better storyline is don't touch the xenomorphs' history, except for and touch the engineers' history. Be just like, yeah, the engineers existed. They are a technologically advanced race. They didn't need to go into stasis to like to travel the universe. They got wiped out by the xenomorphs, and you'll be just like, okay, whoa, hang on, that technology advanced kind of thing couldn't survive this. How are we? You're then increasing. The movie could entirely be on the history of the xenomorph engineer war kind of thing, which makes them even scary and kind of like So now what we also have to deal with then is not only the xenomorph, but the traps and stuff that the engineers left behind like to like destroy the xenomorphs. So we don't need to see the evolution of them being like weird black goo to the deacon, and then eventually into the xenomorph that we know and love, kind of thing. So it's kind of like you had a really good idea of essentially like having them, which is alien. The xenomorphs essentially just made scarier. They're just like, oh yeah, so this a technology advanced race couldn't even face them. Now that's a trope. I do know that whole trope of like making your alien race even more scary by essentially having them wipe out an advanced kind of species is pretty bad. But we're already terrified of the xenomorphs. The xenomorphs
Yep.
are already explained. There's no kind of like we need to big these out guys up like anymore, but we will because they're creepy as hell. But the thing is, then it makes David's character, Michael Fassbender's character, a lot more dangerous when he starts dabbling in the engineering technology and also starts messing with the xenomorphs. Like that would be a whole more interesting, dangerous thing. Other than it's just like, oh yeah, he's just impregnating people with xenomorph eggs. You're kind of just like, oh cool. So Bishop in Alien wants to take the xenomorph back, and then we've got sorry, not Bishop. I can't remember his name. Kane.
Yeah.
Kane in the first one. We've just got another Kane essentially wanting to bring the alien back. We've already established this story, essentially. So essentially having him mess with engineering and xenomorph after being explained the xenomorph engineering war would be a way more story. It's just like, oh yeah, I want to be the fourth race in this group. So we got humans, engineers, xenomorphs, and androids, and then you're just like, cool. This is going to be a more interesting kind of thing because it makes now not only do we have to worry about xenomorphs, we now have to worry about David and his like I'm better than humans. You know, sorry, I
There
just
are hundreds of ways. I'm with you, but there are hundreds of ways that you could make Prometheus better.
yeah, I'm
And the
just
number one way is just not have made it at all.
yes,
Because this is, for me, it's one of the prototypical examples of you don't do prequelology this way. You don't try and extend your story by going back to the start of something. And Paul, I think you might have a poster image, but there is another scary movie that I happen to love very much that has had a sequel that
mm-hmm.
they did an all right job with,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's going
pretty
to
bad.
get a prequel, and that's The Quiet Place. And
Yep.
I'm not completely down with, once there's a something and there's a great scary something like the xenomorph in that haunted house in space, and then the xenomorphs and the Queen killing Marines, space Marines in Aliens. Quiet Place has done a great job of coming up with some truly scary and through its conceit again because of how they get you and how they find you and noise being their bait or their lure to you, let's say. The next Quiet Place entry is going to be here's where they came from, here's what it was like, here's how it all started. I'm up for a big disaster movie as much as the next person, but they could really jump the shark, prequeling the hell out of themselves here to go, we're going to explain exactly what these things are, exactly where they're from. Because when you do that, particularly in horror, you remove the mystique. And God knows they can make another prequel mistake and they can say, and here's how you actually kill them. Here's their fatal weakness that, we another fatal weakness, not the one that you found in the original film. Here's something else. It just was forgotten or it was lost. It's like, well, now we're just giving them new weaknesses so that you can kill them in each movie.
Yeah. My so I think one of my biggest problems with this sequel or with this prequel idea of Quiet Place is the fact is that it's like uh Shaun of the Dead does a really good thing, which is it shows a zombie outbreak building up, and then right at the end, spoilers, right at the end, the army just comes and just blasts all the zombies away. And you're just like, yeah, that's kind of probably what would happen. In most zombie outbreaks, we don't get to see what the army was doing. We don't get to see what like military forces and trained forces were really doing because they're built to fight, you know?
Yeah.
So like the whole thing is that with A Quiet Place, I doubt like if those monsters essentially can be killed with a shotgun to the face, it's kind of like but the problem is that they're fast, they're stronger, and they're sneaky as hell, and literally any noise brings like an absolute horde of them towards you. You know? That makes sense when like society has broken down and the only people defending you is yourselves. But like knowing like how does a military force get broken down by essentially, these creatures? Like unless it's just there's so many of them that it's impossible for like, for a military force to in any way engage them properly. But like, I doubt they're bomb proof. I doubt they're like overly like
Yeah.
like heavy weaponry proof. So like having this prequel where it's just like, yeah, they invade and they kind of fuck our communities up and stuff like that. You're just like, okay, you have to now go. How did the world governments fail? How did the military like fail? How did anyone with a gun who's insane enough to take these creatures on also fail? Like over time, because like that's like so like there's so many levels already there. There's like, okay, we have the initial chaos which every outbreak zombie movie has or alien invasion has, but like eventually we're going to like start rallying together, start kind of figure things out, communications are going to start getting established again and stuff in the most rudimentary, in the most like basic of terms. The militaries are start going to get organized and stuff like that and be able to start like you know start moving slowly out again and stuff. And it's just like you're gonna have to explain all this. How does this fail? Because they do not seem that advanced.
This is the problem, though. You're going to have to explain it. And that's where the prequel Pitfall comes in. It's what you choose to do. Oh, they swarm. All of a sudden, these things that you've now watched 2 movies where quite literally people were able to walk around in the open because there weren't swarms of these things. You made a noise and one showed up or two showed up or whatever, but there was none of this. Oh, they move around in swarms of 50,000.
Yeah.
If they have to answer the questions that you've just given, which they will have to in some way, or they'll have to ignore it in some way. But if they choose to, then you can do that thing that we're talking about. You can introduce something that completely poisons downstream because, oh, really? Now they behave completely differently for this story.
Mm.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, great. So that really invalidates what's about to happen next.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there are brilliant writers out there that can close every loophole and do a great job, but brilliant writers tend not to be doing prequels. I don't
No.
know how many brilliant writers are sitting there going, you know what I'm going to do next? I'm going to make something with the beginning written after it. Because how many bad movies out there? Just type in the beginning or beginning and find a good movie in that list. There are very, very few.
Yeah.
There are one or two.
The Batman Begins, but that's it, and that's not a prequel.
But it's not Batman : the beginning
Yeah,
or
no, it's
Texas
not.
Chainsaw Massacre :
I
the beginning or any of that stuff.
I agree with you. I just wanted to cut off the nerds in our group who will just be like,
Thank you.
Batman Begins, because Exorcist Beginning is
me.
terrible, ruins The Exorcist, as well. So,
Good writers aren't writing the beginning things.
No.
They're writing The Quiet Place.
Yes. No, I agree because you're adding in essentially things, which is the Thing is another like adjacent to the Quiet Place kind of prequel. The Thing, and I also would say is also kind of to the to Rogue One. It's completely pointless to me. It's explaining a story none of those people we already know that none of those people survive, you know. Which is the Thing escapes and then gets into the place that we all love. This is the 2011 prequel to the Thing. This is explaining.
Oh yeah, spoiler warning for the Mary Elizabeth Winstead thing from 2011.
Yeah, it's the it's this. It explains what happened to the Scandinavian team, previous that they go up and have a look at and stuff like that. It's a completely pointless thing. We know that all the characters die in it because none of them escape. None of them venture into the next into the original movie, and we're just like, hey, John here. That's my point. That's the annoying part of it. It doesn't bring anything new to the table. It doesn't bring any kind of it explains one part of the entire of the original, which is the big huge hole that you see right at the end. Or right at the beginning, I think you see a big huge hole. Yeah, you just see a big hole, and they just explain what that was. But it doesn't explain. It doesn't give you, which is good. It doesn't give you any history of the creature. It doesn't give you any more weaknesses than you already have. And it does exactly the same. It's literally the same movie, which is a pitfall, which is it's just copying the same movie and just going, here's 7 other people, kind of thing. So I find the Thing the most pointless prequel in the world.
And this is beautiful because, folks, I said this to Paul just before we went live because he said he put the Thing in his list and I haven't put it on mine. I have, and Paul, I explained it to you very briefly because I said I'll tell you on air that I am 50% with you, and 50% of me hates the Thing remake, as I call it, because it's a remake prequel. They tried to just essentially capture the first film, retell the story again, and then go, oh, but clever twist, we're a prequel. It's I respect its moxie, to give it the old 1920s. There's part of me that likes this, and maybe that's just because I'm a big fan of Mary Elizabeth Winstead and good acting.
Great at it.
She is great in it because she's great in everything. But I'm completely with you for 50% of me. And I don't know which 50% I'm going to be for the next 3 minutes. This is my two-faced dent. I am absolutely loathe this movie along with you and go, it's the most pointless thing ever. And then part of me goes, yeah, but I watched it and I'm like, I love the Thing so much. I can watch a bit of a remake and it won't hurt anything. It's a prequel.
Well, see,
it's a very disturbed one for me because it walks a few different worlds.
Well, my thing is that it's not. This is so. I will say that this is a bad prequel because it doesn't do anything.
Mm,
Sorry, it's not even a bad prequel. It's not a yeah. It's a bad prequel because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't even bring. It
yeah.
doesn't bring you anything to the table. It answers one question, but it's not a bad movie because that's where I separate. I'll
I hear you.
separate two things out. Where it's just like the thing is a good is a decent movie, but it's not a good prequel. You know, and there's several on our list that
Yeah.
I'd say are like I would say Rogue One, not a bad prequel, not a bad movie. You know,
Yeah.
uh, the Prometheus is a bad prequel and a bad movie.
Thank God you said that. Yeah.
I will even say that some of the Star Wars prequels are good prequels but bad movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm.
so like
Yep.
that's it's a weird combination of like if it's a bad prequel and a bad movie, you've just killed the franchise. If it's a bad
Yes.
prequel but a good movie, it can be excused. If it's a good
Yes.
prequel and a bad if it's a bad prequel and a good movie, yes, if it's a bad
I
movie
feel
but a
that you need to go over to the cork board with the
yeah,
red string now.
need to get that straight. So if it's a good movie and a bad prequel, you can excuse it for the prequel. If it's a bad movie and a good prequel, you could be just like, well, at least I brought something to the table, you know, kind of thing. That's it,
I'm with you.
you know.
And ladies and gentlemen,
Oh,
look up committed. And that's Paul just now. He was
oh,
committed to getting that right and getting it out
had
there.
to get it
And I
out.
love you for it. Because, well, Paul, I don't know what you were going to segue to next, but do you mind if I throw?
Go for it.
Because I think this throws nicely to Prey.
It
Because Prey,
does.
when you said good movie and good prequel,
Yeah.
it it is it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom level good when it comes to its prequelness for me. But it's much more obviously prequel, which gives it much more skin in this particular game and many more punches in this particular fight. I think I really enjoyed Prey.
I
I
did
think
do.
Prey is one of the things I enjoyed most last year when it came out, or the year before. I cannot remember because time has no meaning anymore. But it is very clearly a prequel in the sense that it goes back further in our existence in time. But it doesn't, all the pitfalls that we've mentioned, it looks at them and goes, why would I do that? I'm a Predator movie where I'm actually, and I'm so brave here. I'm just going to call myself Prey. And there's going to be predators, and there's a predator in this, and we're going to do what we've done in all the others, show it from the prey's point of view, but we're going to make that an interesting character and have a nice little action movie around that. It's so prequely. The gun, again, not going to spoil it for anybody because it's too recent, but the gun, Danny Glover, there's a whole, like, there's nods. There's enough that they're trying to still be prequely, but they don't go crazy. And they certainly don't, to your technology point, they do enough to kind of hint at, well, maybe they had this, maybe they didn't have that yet. Maybe it would be more basic back then than it is now. Again, didn't lean hard into the idea of we're showing off that this is a prequel. They did the Indiana Jones thing going, we've got a cool universe. Our main character, Dutch, we're not going to be able to use him from the first movie because we're not doing another entry in that. But what we are going to use is our other main character, which is essentially a race of 9 foot, 8.5 foot tall predator people whose code we've built the universe. They're going to show up and there's going to be some hunting done. You want to watch how the prey becomes the predator? Let's do it. Great prequel.
Yeah.
Great reason to do a prequel. We've got more we can tell because we can have fun. We don't have to expound on everything in the universe. Great movie. Put that together. Forget that it's a prequel altogether. Ipso facto, Prey and Temple of Doom are the same movie. Sorry, I just threw that in at the end.
No, I agree. I agree because it doesn't fall into like it doesn't. So the good thing about the Predator films is once they said it as a prequel, there was and said it so far into the past prequely, there was no pressures of like the lore or so or like kind of there's no lore pressures as much. There's no tonal issues as much because they do want to make it change as much as possible. The technology one is easy because like the majority of the movie is set in a time period that everybody knows what was going on there, and they didn't decide to advance the Predator's technology so much They didn't do it at all. They were just like, he has the plasma caster, he has some variable weapons that are just made out of that metal that just goes through things, which I'm suspicious of, like with lightsaber technology, kind of thing. It doesn't in any way give us any more of their society and community at all. It's actually less about the predator and more about the main character, kind of thing. It's essentially a monster
Exactly.
movie where they were just like, we want a prequel, but it's just a prequel in the sense that we're just setting it before everything else.
They respected their xenomorph. That's the difference.
They did indeed. Um, God, there's so much things to go into.
You pick at random or pick freely because, like I said at the start, everybody, we could go on all night about this. I just want to call out a few comments real quick, Paul, while you're making a choice because Ben Brian, thank you for your input. I'm sorry we haven't gone back to the chat earlier.
Yeah,
I can see people are agreeing in general about the dangers of prequels. Um, Pop culture, I think you may have missed me having to go at Crystal Skull. It was all done with respect. So massive respect to
it
you, but
wasn't.
sequels were brought up because of prequels in Indiana Jones. Um, but I see you've got a few great points here. Talking about Prey, saying that they get the technology right, which I hinted at there. But I love your last comment. Prey doesn't explain the Predator. We don't need that. Paul,
No,
that is the thesis that we hit earlier on.
with the
It
xenomorphs, yeah.
concisely put on, there's a line for the back of that DVD.
Mhm.
Watch this. Prey doesn't explain the Predator. We don't need that. That could have been on a poster because I would have been like, yeah, damn right. I know these people are taking this seriously.
Well, like this is the thing. So it doesn't risk any canon inconsistencies that much as long as they do the technology kind of timeline stuff. There's no real comparison with the originals because there's no original characters there. So like we don't really need that. There's no that pitfall. The fan expectation is just have a good Predator movie kind of thing. They
Yeah.
avoid the narrative, the limited narrative freedom because they're not leading into another story. They're essentially just taking
Yeah.
their own piece, which is so good, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
the only reliance on nostalgia is that we know about the Predators. That's literally it. There's no other nostalgia kind of thing of like they need to show us Dutch's somehow the Predator is able to go back in time and it shows like Dutch's arm clasping another arm or something. We don't. There's no nostalgia buzz
Yeah.
there except for just the that kind of thing. So like it's a really good one. I will say that I'm going to choose the Hobbits films because these are kind of my like this my thing with these prequels is the fact is that they're what happens when you just try to slam in so much lore. Like they could have just told the Hobbit story and I think everybody would have enjoyed it as a prequel of just going. That's like if they were just to answer the question of how did like Bilbo get the ring, you know, like if
There
that
you
was
go.
this,
Yeah.
if that was the only question that they wanted to answer, then this would have been two movies. It would have been really good and stuff like that. But they decided to throw in a load of other questions, which is like to answer, which is like how did Bilbo get the ring? How did Sauron come back? Like where did all the dwarves go? All this kind of like thing, and it's just like no, you don't need to answer all those questions. Just answer the
Yeah.
one question, which is how Bilbo got the ring. And the adventure in which that was, which is literally his adventure to Erebor to get like the dwarves under the mountains home back. That's it. Don't answer the question of this, like how Sauron raised, like in the book. Spoilers to the book. The whole part of him going of Gandalf going to see the necromancer doesn't happen in the book. Doesn't happen in
Mm.
the Hobbit. What happens is Gandalf goes away for a couple of days and then comes back and essentially goes, "Well, that was weird. Like, what's going on here?" And it's in one of the untold stories or the Silmarillion or something like that that actually like goes and like explains what happens with Gandalf in those couple of days that he's gone. And it's just like that would have been good. These are good movies, but bad prequels in the sense that they add too much that people didn't ask for at all. Um,
It's This is a prequel trilogy that could have been a prequel. There's the problem for me in a lot of ways because I still haven't watched all the Hobbits and I've openly admitted that before because I got so annoyed after the first one. I read the Hobbit. It's for younger children. Tolkien wrote it at a different time. You could have made one, maybe two movies, But because the Lord of the Rings trilogy had become such a thing, not only were they doing prequels, but hey, there's precedent. There was a book there. They had to go and like, oh yeah, we'll make this a trilogy and we'll cram it full of stuff, Paul, that you just outlined is unnecessary because it slows down and ruins a story and fills in everything that doesn't need to be filled in to tell your story.
Yeah.
Prequelitis, damn it.
Yeah.
And also trilogy-itis, damn it, for, this is definitely Star Trek 12, The Search for More Money, or whatever the old joke was.
It was, yeah. It was essentially just because they wanted to fill in gaps that didn't need to be filled in. We wanted to see Bilbo's story. We didn't need to see, Rise of Sauron's story as well. So, I just want to say
Yeah.
there's a thing of the John Wick prequel was a good one, but it had no John Wick. I would argue that the Continental is not a John Wick prequel. I would argue that it's a Continental story. Like it explains the rise of the Continental, not the rise of John Wick or how he came about, or even the society that came about from the assassin kind of thing. Just I saw that there and I had to answer.
While we're in the comments, Paul, I'd like to ask people in the comments right now, watching in the future or right now, but especially if you're watching right now, get in there with what you think is a really good prequel. If we've already mentioned it, feel free to big it up. But what you think is a great prequel. And if you have time or have one in mind, what you think is the worst prequel. But also, Brian says, I need to see Prey. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Brian, you need to see Prey. You are going to dig that movie. I hate overhyping movies, but it is exactly what you like. It's not over fussy. It actually knows what it wants to be, and it gets on and does its job. It's a movie without a great load of pretension. I think you'll really dig it.
Yeah, I think it will as well. Is there any other ones that you want to direly? Do you want to do?
There's one in particular that I want to talk to Paul about in front of you all, because we've never had this conversation, Paul. The first of the J.J. Abrams Star Treks. So the first of the new cast Star Trek.
Yes.
Here's the thing. I went to see that with a very good friend of mine who is a huge, and I mean huge, Star Trek fan. I like Star Trek, loved Star Trek at the time. Now I just like it because they've done enough to hurt me. But I went in, watched the movie, came out and turned to him and went, it's brilliant. I thought it was great the way they protected the original timeline. And this, how to have your cake and eat it too, is do what they just did. Go in and say, we're about to mess with stuff. We're about to, mess with all your canon. But what we're doing is we're going to take a slice and we're going to slightly alternate universe this. So everything that you have is untouched and you get to do this. And he turned to me and he said, no. And I'm like, what do you mean no? He's nope. No, I want to put back the way it was. I'm like, no, that's still like, we're safe now. There's a pane of glass between these two things. They will not corrupt each other. No, I want it back. I want it back. I don't want any of this. I don't want this to be where they've gone. I want them to don't mess with my old stuff. And to this day, and he's still one of my best friends, we talk about this because we still cannot get on the same page. So, Paul, what do you think? Are you pro or con the Star Trek split, let's say?
I'm fine with it. I think it's a great way of essentially being able to tell new stories and stuff like that and go off in an alternative kind of way. I do think that it's a cop out in the sense of just it's essentially them being able to just reuse like familiar names kind of thing, but in new kind of stories, which is grand. I've no overly problem with it and stuff like that. So yeah, I have deep problems with Discovery in the sense that it introduces a new way of doing things, and that kind of stuff.
I did mention being hurt.
Yeah,
which Discovery covers.
But the Star Trek, what you guys, I think it was 2009. What you guys?
I think
2008.
Yeah, around then.
Yeah.
Somebody will correct us.
Yeah, Star Trek film was a genius way of kind of, we want to do a prequel. We want to do how Kirk gets his commission, but we don't want to ruin anything that comes before us. We're going to change the timelines and go off on our own thing. And that was a great, I really enjoyed Star Trek Beyond and which was, what was the other one? Star Trek Into Darkness.
Into Darkness, which
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed more than Beyond. I'll be honest.
Beyond was an interesting story, but was just Beyond was a good one of kind of like David Cumberbatch is absolutely amazing for Khan. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, Paul, is there any that you wanted again? Because we are very limited on time, so I think it might be thanking the kind folks unless there's one that you want to quickly run.
no, I think like going through, so like over like I think one of our biggest things on is over reliance on nostalgia, the pressures of kind of expanding lores, technology, the character backstory, high expectations. There's a load of prequel kind of problems that you just shouldn't go near. Like,
And if I was to sum it up in one line, make a sequel if there's a story you want to tell, but make a prequel if there's a story that you absolutely need to tell.
yeah,
Because you can want to make a sequel. You can go, I've got a great idea for a sequel and I love and care about it and I'll make it. But if you're going to choose to do prequel, it has to be this is something that was necessary.
yeah,
And in that case, your story, the best way to do it is to do a little Rogue One and get off over to the side, or do an Indiana Jones and go, I'm taking the main character, main cast, whatever it might be, but I'm having an entry, not a prequel. It just happened to happen earlier. Paul,
yeah.
the comments just before we go then, because I see we've got Some of All Fears is a great Jack Ryan prequel. And Brian says none that I can think of right now. That's because it's a pretty damn short list, Brian. So it was a mean question from my part because I don't think there are that many brilliant prequels.
I don't think Some of All Fears is a great Jack Ryan prequel because Red October is also a Jack Ryan film, and that's set during the Cold War. And if and the other Jack Ryan films are also set during like the Patriot and stuff like that. They're all set like during like yeah. I don't think it's is that a
Yeah.
prequel? That would be weird.
I don't know, but we get 60 seconds, and I
Yeah,
got to say half of Godfather 2 is a prequel. Brian,
yeah,
yes, I would agree that half of Godfather 2 is a
yeah,
prequel. A whole other day as to whether or not we'd ever classify it as an actual prequel,
yeah.
because that might get us rubbed off the internet altogether.
Indeed. All right, guys. We'll see you later. Comment down below your other prequel choices. We'll see you. I'm Paul,
And I've been Patrick.
and we're here us out. Bye.
Bye.